The entire restaurant froze when the little girl raised her hands and began to sign something only the billionaire could understand. But it was what she revealed about the manager that left everyone speechless. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel and let's get started. Sir, do you want this or this? The waiter pointed at two different menu items without looking directly at Richard Whitman's face. Richard kept his expression neutral as he tapped the menu decisively with his index finger. The waiter nodded and hurried away, not attempting any further communication. Just another evening at the Starlight restaurant for Richard, where his deafness was treated as an inconvenience rather than simply part of who he was. Richard straightened the sleeve of his navy custom-tailored suit, a garment that had cost $3,000 but couldn't buy him the simple respect of eye contact from the staff. His silver hair was perfectly trimmed, his blue eyes sharp as they surveyed the restaurant from his corner table. At 60 years old, Richard had grown accustomed to the invisible wall his deafness created. People either avoided him entirely or spoke too loudly and slowly as if he were a child. Few bothered to learn that he could read lips expertly, and even fewer knew he was worth billions. Across the dining room, Grace Johnson balanced 3 plates along her arm with practiced skill. Her kind smile never faltered despite the exhaustion in her eyes. "Here's your roasted salmon with extra asparagus, Mrs. Cooper. And for Mr. Cooper, the filet mignon, medium rare, and grilled chicken for your daughter." Grace set each plate down carefully. "Thank you, dear," Mrs. Cooper said. "You always remember exactly how we like everything." Grace tucked a strand of curly hair behind her ear. "That's what keeps you coming back every Tuesday, right?" After ensuring her table had everything they needed, Grace slipped into the staff break room. Her daughter Maya sat at a small table, brow furrowed in concentration over her math homework. "How's it going, sweetheart?" Grace asked, quickly checking her watch. Maya looked up, her bright eyes lighting up. "Good. I finished my math and started on my history questions." She was small for 10 years old, wearing her favorite cream-colored dress, her hair in neat braids. "That's my girl. I've got about 2 more hours on my shift. You okay here?" Maya nodded. "Can I use my tablet for a little while? I want to practice more sign language." Grace smiled. For months now, Maya had been teaching herself American Sign Language through online videos. "Sure, but just 30 minutes, then back to homework." "Thanks, Mom." Maya pulled out her tablet and immediately opened her sign language app. Grace returned to the dining room floor just as Marcus Brown emerged from his office. The restaurant manager surveyed the room with calculating eyes, his designer suit immaculate, his expression cool and controlled. "Grace," he called sharply. "Table 7 has been waiting 5 minutes for their check." "I'm heading there now," Grace replied, hurrying to retrieve the bill. Marcus watched her with narrowed eyes before turning his attention to a group of wealthy-looking customers, his demeanor instantly transforming into polished charm. "Welcome to Starlight. Your table is ready. Please, follow me." At his corner table, Richard observed this exchange. Being deaf had made him exceptionally observant of body language and facial expressions. He noticed how Marcus's smile never reached his eyes when speaking to staff, how his posture changed completely when addressing customers. Richard had been coming to Starlight every Thursday for months. The food was excellent, but that wasn't why he kept returning. There was something about the restaurant's dynamics that intrigued him. He watched as Grace efficiently managed her tables, treating every customer with genuine warmth. As the evening progressed, Richard also observed Marcus taking a phone call in a quiet corner, his back turned to the restaurant. Though Richard couldn't hear the conversation, he could see tension in Marcus's shoulders, the furtive glances around to ensure no one was watching. When Richard's meal arrived, the waiter simply set it down and walked away without a word. Richard sighed inwardly. He tapped on his water glass when it needed refilling, and the staff responded as if he were signaling to a dog rather than requesting service. After finishing his meal, Richard struggled to get someone's attention for the check. He raised his hand several times, but servers rushed past, apparently not seeing him or choosing not to. Finally, Grace noticed and approached his table. "I'm sorry, sir. Did you need something?" She spoke clearly, making an effort to face him directly. Richard appreciated the small courtesy. He pointed to his empty plate and made a writing motion with his hand. "The check?" "Of course." Grace nodded, understanding immediately. When she returned with his bill, Richard wrote a note on the receipt. "Thank you for actually looking at me when speaking." He added a 50% tip. Grace read the note and looked up with a genuine smile, mouthing "thank you" very clearly so he could read her lips. In the break room, Maya was watching a new sign language video when Sarah, another waitress, entered. "Hey kiddo," Sarah said. "Your mom is amazing out there, 3 big parties and she hasn't missed a beat." Maya nodded proudly. "She's the best. Why do people keep looking at that man in the corner? The one with gray hair?" Sarah glanced through the doorway. "Oh, that's Richard Whitman. He's deaf. Comes in every Thursday. Most servers don't like his table because they don't know how to talk to him." "That's silly," Maya said. "He can read lips, or people could write notes, or learn some basic signs." Sarah smiled. "You're a smart kid. Maybe you should teach everyone here some sign language." The evening continued smoothly until Grace noticed Marcus checking his watch repeatedly, his expression growing darker. Just before 9 o'clock, he approached her as she delivered desserts to a family of 4. "Grace, I need to see you in my office when you're done here," he said, his voice low and tight. "Is everything okay?" Grace asked. "Now, Grace." Marcus turned and walked toward his office without waiting for a response. Grace quickly finished with her table and followed Marcus, anxiety building in her chest. She knocked lightly on his office door. "Come in," Marcus called. The office was meticulously organized, with awards and certificates lining the walls. Marcus sat behind a large desk, his expression severe. "Close the door," he instructed. Grace complied, her heart beating faster. "Is there a problem?" Marcus leaned forward, folding his hands on the desk. $8,000 is missing from the restaurant safe." The blood drained from Grace's face. "What? How?" "Only you and I know the security code," Marcus interrupted, his voice dangerously calm. "And I certainly didn't take it. Marcus, I would never— Return the money by tomorrow, or I'll call the police." His cold eyes bore into hers. "With your record, who do you think they'll believe? A manager with a spotless reputation, or a waitress who was convicted of shoplifting at 19? Grace stood frozen, her world crumbling around her. "But I didn't take any money. You know I wouldn't." "Tomorrow, Grace." Marcus turned to his computer, dismissing her. "That's all." Grace stumbled from the office, her hands shaking. How could this be happening? Where would she find $8,000 overnight? What would happen to Maya if she went to jail? Across the restaurant, Richard Whitman observed Grace's pale face and trembling hands as she returned to the dining room. Something had changed. He watched as she moved mechanically between tables, her earlier warmth replaced by barely concealed panic. In the break room, Maya looked up as the door opened, immediately noticing her mother's distress. "Mom? What's wrong?" Grace forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Nothing, sweetheart. Just a long night. We'll be heading home soon." But Maya knew better. She slipped her tablet into her backpack and made a decision. Something was wrong with her mother, and she was going to find out what it was. Grace walked out of Marcus's office, her legs feeling weak. She leaned against the wall for a moment, trying to breathe normally. $8,000. The amount kept repeating in her mind. How could she possibly find that much money by tomorrow? She pushed herself away from the wall and headed back to the dining room. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking as she picked up a water pitcher to refill glasses at table 12. "Are you okay, dear?" asked an elderly woman as Grace accidentally spilled water on the tablecloth. "I'm so sorry," Grace said, quickly grabbing napkins to soak up the spill. "I'll get you a new tablecloth right away." As she hurried to the linen closet, Grace bumped into Sarah Williams, a new waitress who had started at Starlight Restaurant just 2 weeks ago. "Whoa, what's wrong?" Sarah asked, noticing Grace's pale face. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Grace shook her head. "I can't talk about it right now. I need to change this tablecloth." Sarah gently took the fresh tablecloth from Grace's trembling hands. "I'll take care of it. Take a minute for yourself." "Thank you," Grace whispered, slipping into the quiet corner near the dessert station. She pulled out her phone and checked her bank balance. $342, not even close to what she needed. Grace closed her eyes, fighting back tears. With her past record, who would believe she didn't take the money? And what would happen to Maya if she went to jail? From his corner table, Richard Whitman observed Grace's distress. He noticed how her efficient movements had become jerky and uncertain. He saw Marcus watching her too, but with a different kind of attention, something that looked almost like satisfaction. Marcus approached Grace with a stack of menus. "Tables 14, 16, and 20 need service. Jennifer called in sick, so you'll cover her section too." "But that's the entire east side of the restaurant," Grace protested quietly. Marcus smiled coldly. "Is that a problem? Perhaps you'd prefer to discuss your situation instead?" "No," Grace said quickly. "I'll handle it." As Marcus walked away, Grace took a deep breath and grabbed the menus. At the break room door, she caught a glimpse of Maya watching her with worried eyes. Grace forced a smile and waved before hurrying to table 14. During a brief moment between orders, Grace called her landlord, turning toward the wall for privacy. "Mr. Jenkins, it's Grace Johnson. I know my rent is already 5 days late, but I need just a little more time." "Grace, I've been patient because you're usually reliable, but I need that money by Friday." The landlord's voice came through the phone. "Please, just one more week. Things are tight right now, but I'll have it, I promise." After reluctantly getting a week's extension, Grace searched online for emergency loans on her phone. Every option required credit checks she couldn't pass or charged interest rates she couldn't afford. In the break room, Maya had abandoned her homework. She quietly opened the door and peeked out, watching her mother rush between tables. Even from a distance, Maya could tell something was very wrong. Her mom never mixed up orders or dropped things, but tonight she had done both several times. Maya's eyes drifted to the deaf man in the corner. He seemed to be watching everything too, his eyes sharp and observant. Unlike the other customers who were focused on their meals or conversations, he was paying attention to what was happening around him. "Maya, you should be doing your homework," Sarah said, finding her at the door. "Something's wrong with my mom," Maya said. "She's upset." Sarah hesitated. "Grown-ups have tough days sometimes. I'm sure she'll tell you about it when she's ready." But Maya wasn't convinced. She slipped past Sarah and found a spot behind a large plant where she could watch the restaurant floor without being seen. Grace approached a table with 4 businessmen carrying a tray of drinks. As she began to set them down, Marcus appeared suddenly beside her. "These gentlemen are very important clients," he said loudly enough for the men to hear. "Make sure they get our very best service." Grace nodded, but the unexpected interruption caused her to misjudge the distance to the table. A full glass of water tipped over, spilling directly onto one man's expensive suit. "Oh my God!" the man shouted, jumping up. "I'm so sorry," Grace said, grabbing napkins. "I'm so sorry. What's wrong with you?" the man demanded. "This suit cost more than you probably make in a month." Marcus appeared instantly. "Sir, please accept our deepest apologies. Your meal tonight will be complimentary, of course." He turned to Grace with cold eyes. "Take a break and collect yourself. Clearly, you're not focused tonight." Grace retreated to the staff bathroom where she finally let the tears fall. She splashed cold water on her face and stared at her reflection. "What am I going to do?" she whispered to herself. "What am I going to do about Maya?" The thought of her daughter gave Grace the strength to dry her tears and return to work. She had to keep it together, at least until her shift ended. As she passed Marcus's office, she overheard his voice through the partially open door. "Yes, Mr. Peterson." I wanted to discuss this with you in person tomorrow. $8,000 is missing, and I have reason to believe Grace Johnson took it." Grace froze. Mr. Peterson was Harold Peterson, the owner of Starlight Restaurant. Marcus was already telling him she was a thief. "Her behavior tonight confirms my suspicions," Marcus continued. "She's been extremely nervous and making mistakes she never makes. I think we should consider termination." Grace backed away from the door, her heart pounding. Not only was she being accused of theft, but she was about to lose her job, too. Near the dessert station, Sarah approached her. "Are you okay? You look terrible." "I can't talk about it," Grace said, her voice barely audible. "Look, I don't know what's going on, but—" Sarah looked around to make sure no one was listening. "Marcus has been acting weird lately. He's been dating some woman who works at that fancy jewelry store on 5th Avenue. He bought her a necklace that probably cost thousands of dollars last week." Grace looked up sharply. "How do you know that?" "My cousin works there. She said Marcus has been spending way more than a restaurant manager should be able to afford." This information added another layer to Grace's confusion. Could Marcus be stealing from the restaurant himself? But without proof, it was just gossip. Maya had moved closer to Richard's table, watching him with curiosity. When he tried to signal a server for his check and was ignored again, Maya made a decision. Meanwhile, Grace finished serving her last table and headed to the staff bathroom again. This time, she broke down completely, sobbing quietly in the stall. The weight of Marcus's accusation crushed her. With her past record, the police would almost certainly believe him over her. She thought about Maya waiting in the break room, unaware that their lives might be about to fall apart. After washing her face again, Grace tried to think clearly. She had to find a way out of this situation. Maybe she could ask her mother for money, though they barely spoke these days. Or perhaps she could sell her car, though she needed it to get Maya to school and herself to work. Every solution led to another problem. When Grace returned to the dining room, she noticed something unusual. Maya was no longer in the break room. Instead, she was standing at Richard Whitman's table, her hands moving in the familiar patterns of sign language. Richard's face had transformed from its usual neutral expression to one of surprised delight as his hands moved rapidly in response to Maya's signing. The girl who had taught herself American Sign Language through online videos was now having a full conversation with the deaf billionaire everyone else avoided. Grace hurried toward them, unsure whether to be worried or relieved by this unexpected development. As she approached, she saw Richard smile for the first time since he had been coming to the restaurant. Whatever Maya had said to him had broken through his usual reserved demeanor. What Grace didn't know was that this unlikely connection between her daughter and the silent observer in the corner was about to change everything. Grace hurried across the dining room, watching Maya's hands move in fluid signs to Richard Whitman. The restaurant seemed unusually quiet, as if everyone was suddenly aware of the unexpected conversation happening between the young girl and the deaf man. "Hello?" Maya was signing. "My name is Maya. Do you need help ordering?" Richard's hands moved quickly in response, his face brightening with surprise and pleasure. He signed back, "You know sign language? Where did you learn?" Maya grinned. "I taught myself from videos online. I practice every day." Grace reached their table, feeling slightly embarrassed. "Maya, I'm so sorry, sir. Maya, you shouldn't bother customers." Richard waved his hand dismissively and continued signing to Maya, who then turned to her mother. "He says it's not a bother at all. He's happy someone is finally talking to him properly." Maya translated, her hands still moving as she spoke. Grace looked between her daughter and Richard, unsure what to say. Please tell him I apologize if our staff hasn't been communicative enough." Maya signed this to Richard, whose eyes crinkled with amusement. He signed back rapidly. "He says most people either ignore him or point at things like he's a baby," Maya explained. "He comes here for the food, but nobody ever really talks to him." Nearby diners were watching with interest. Some looked impressed, others seemed embarrassed, perhaps realizing how they'd treated Richard on previous visits. Richard signed again and Maya nodded. "Mom, he wants to know if you could sit down for a minute. He wants to talk." "Maya, I'm working. I can't just—" "Please, Mom. It's important." Grace glanced around nervously. Marcus was in his office on the phone. She pulled out a chair and sat down quickly. "Just for a minute," she said. Richard signed to Maya, who translated. "He says you look upset. He's been watching everyone in the restaurant for months, and he can tell something's wrong." Grace felt her face flush. "Tell him I'm fine. Just a busy night." Maya signed this, but Richard shook his head firmly and signed back. "He says you're not fine," Maya translated. "He says he's deaf but not blind and he can see you're in trouble." Grace looked at Richard directly. His blue eyes were kind but determined. She hesitated, then spoke slowly so he could read her lips. "It's just work stress. Nothing to worry about." Richard signed to Maya again, his expression serious. "He wants to know if it has something to do with Marcus calling you into his office earlier," Maya said. Grace stared at him in shock. "How did he—" "Mom, what happened with Marcus?" "Please tell us," Maya urged, her young face worried. Grace looked around again. Most customers were focused on their meals now, and Marcus was still in his office. She took a deep breath. "Marcus accused me of stealing money from the restaurant," she said quietly. $8,000 from the safe. He says I need to return it by tomorrow or he'll call the police." Maya's eyes widened as she signed this information to Richard. Richard's face darkened immediately. His hands moved in rapid, sharp movements that even Maya struggled to follow. "He's asking if you took the money," Maya said. "No." "Of course not," Grace said firmly. "But Marcus says only he and I know the security code to the safe. And with my record from when I was 19, the police might believe him." When Maya translated this, Richard leaned forward, his eyes intense. He signed more slowly now. "He wants to know what record," Maya said hesitantly. Grace swallowed hard. "I made a mistake when I was 19. I was caught shoplifting. It was just once, when I was desperate. But it's on my record. Marcus knows about it." As Maya signed this, Richard nodded with understanding. He then signed something that made Maya smile slightly. "He says he's been coming to Starlight Restaurant for 6 months," Maya translated. "Not just for the food, but to observe. He says being deaf has made him notice things other people miss." "What things?" Grace asked. Richard signed extensively, his face animated. Maya translated carefully. "He says he's watched Marcus for months. He's seen him take private phone calls in corners, always when he thinks no one is watching. Richard can read lips, and he's seen Marcus discussing money transfers and expensive purchases." Grace felt a chill. That matches what Sarah told me about Marcus buying expensive jewelry. Richard nodded and continued signing. "He says Marcus always counts money when Harold Peterson isn't here, and he's seen him put papers in his pocket after removing them from the office safe." "But without proof, it's just observations," Grace said, despair creeping into her voice. "Where am I going to find $8,000 by tomorrow?" Maya signed this to Richard, whose expression became thoughtful. He signed back more slowly. "He's asking if you would trust him to help you," Maya said. Grace looked at Richard uncertainly. "I don't understand how you could help." Richard reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek phone. He typed rapidly and showed the screen to Grace. The message read, "My name is Richard Whitman. I am CEO of Whitman Innovations. I believe Marcus is framing you, and I may have evidence." Grace's eyes widened as she read the message, then looked up at Richard's face. I didn't realize who you were." Maya looked confused. "Who is he, Mom?" Before Grace could answer, they noticed Marcus emerging from his office. Grace quickly stood up. "I need to get back to work," she said, her voice low. Thank you for your offer, but I don't want to involve you in my problems. Richard typed another message. Marcus has been stealing for months. You're his scapegoat. Let me help. Grace hesitated, torn between pride and desperation. How? What can you do? Richard signed to Maya, who translated, He wants to meet us after your shift ends. He has a plan. Grace nodded slightly. I finish at 11 o'clock. Richard smiled and signed again. He says to meet him at the coffee shop across the street, Maya translated, and not to worry. He's been recording conversations in the restaurant with his special hearing aids. He thinks he might have caught Marcus saying something important. Grace's eyes widened. Recording? Is that legal? Richard nodded and typed, I record all my experiences to help me navigate a world designed for hearing people. It's legal as long as I'm part of the conversation or in a public place without expectation of privacy. Marcus was approaching their table now, his face showing a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Grace, we have customers waiting, he said sharply. Is there a problem here? Grace straightened up. No problem. Maya was just helping Mr. Whitman with the menu. Marcus looked at Richard with forced politeness. I hope everything is to your satisfaction, sir. Richard nodded curtly, his eyes cold as they met Marcus's. Marcus turned to Maya. You should be in the break room, young lady. This is a dining area, not a playground. She was helping me communicate, Grace said, trying to keep her voice steady. She knows sign language. How nice, Marcus said with a thin smile. But rules are rules. Back to the break room, please. Maya reluctantly signed goodbye to Richard, who signed back with a wink that Marcus couldn't see. She walked back to the break room, glancing over her shoulder at Richard, who gave her a reassuring nod. Mr. Whitman would like his check, Grace said to Marcus. I'll take care of it personally, Marcus replied, clearly wanting to establish his authority. You have tables waiting. As Grace returned to her other customers, she felt a strange mixture of fear and hope. Richard Whitman was not just a regular customer but a powerful businessman who believed her. And somehow he might have evidence that could save her. From his table, Richard watched Marcus carefully as the manager brought his check. Richard signed, "Thank you." But Marcus just nodded awkwardly and walked away. Richard left a large tip for Grace and wrote a note. Coffee shop, 11:15. I'll be waiting. As he stood to leave, Richard cast one last look at Marcus, who was now supervising the dessert station. For the first time since he started coming to Starlight Restaurant, Richard felt a sense of purpose beyond simply observing. The silent observer was about to become an active participant in exposing a truth that had been hidden in plain sight. Richard stepped out of Starlight Restaurant into the cool night air. He checked his watch. It was only 9:30. He had almost 2 hours before meeting Grace and Maya at the coffee shop. Enough time to make some preparations. Grace finished her shift at 11 o'clock exactly. Her hands still trembled slightly as she changed out of her waitress uniform in the staff room. "Ready to go home, sweetie?" she asked Maya, who was packing up her school books. Maya nodded eagerly. "Are we really going to meet Mr. Whitman at the coffee shop?" "Yes, but just for a little while. It's already past your bedtime." They slipped out the back entrance to avoid Marcus, who was still counting receipts in his office. The coffee shop across the street, called Morning Brew, was nearly empty at this late hour. Richard Whitman sat at a corner table with another man in a crisp suit. "Mom, there he is," Maya said, pulling her mother toward the table. Richard stood up when he saw them, smiling warmly. The man beside him stood as well. "Hello," Grace said, feeling suddenly nervous. "Thank you for waiting for us." Richard nodded and gestured to the man beside him, signing rapidly. "He says this is Michael Porter, his assistant," Maya translated. "Michael knows sign language too." "It's a pleasure to meet you both," Michael said, extending his hand. "Richard has explained your situation. Please have a seat." Once they were settled with hot chocolate for Maya and coffee for the adults, Richard began signing to Michael, who spoke for him. Richard believes Marcus Brown has been embezzling from Starlight Restaurant for months, Michael explained. Not just $8,000, but much more. But how would he do that? Grace asked. Harold Peterson checks the books regularly. Richard signed again. He says Marcus is clever, Maya translated. He takes small amounts that won't be noticed right away and he changes numbers in the computer. Grace shook her head. But why accuse me now? Why $8,000? Michael spoke after Richard signed. Richard thinks Marcus made a mistake. He took too much at once and he needs someone to blame quickly before Mr. Peterson notices. And I'm the perfect target because of my record, Grace said bitterly. Richard nodded, his face serious. He pulled out his phone and typed a message. I have recordings from my hearing aids. I record everything to help me understand conversations later. I might have evidence against Marcus. Can we hear it? Grace asked eagerly. Richard shook his head and typed again, Need to review hours of recordings. Michael will help tonight. But more importantly, you have a meeting with Harold Peterson tomorrow, correct? Grace's face fell. Yes, I overheard Marcus arranging it. He's going to tell Mr. Peterson I stole the money. Richard signed to Michael, who nodded. We need to be prepared. Richard believes there might be physical evidence in Marcus's office, cash or documents that could prove his guilt. Maya's eyes widened. Like in spy movies? We need to search his office? Michael smiled slightly. Something like that. Richard suggests that while you're in the meeting tomorrow, we might have an opportunity to look for evidence. But how? Grace asked. Marcus will be there too. Richard typed quickly, I have a plan. Trust me. The next morning arrived too quickly. Grace had barely slept, going over Richard's plan repeatedly in her mind. When her alarm rang at 7 o'clock, she felt sick with worry. Mom? Are you okay? Maya asked, finding Grace staring blankly at her coffee cup. Just nervous about today, Grace admitted. Remember, you're coming straight to the restaurant after school. Sarah will watch you in the break room. I know what to do, Mom, Maya said confidently. Mr. Richard explained everything. Grace arrived at Starlight Restaurant 2 hours before her meeting with Harold Peterson. The lunch service was underway, and Marcus was supervising the floor with his usual cold efficiency. Grace, he called when he saw her. I need to speak with you in the locker room. Grace followed him, her heart pounding. In the empty locker room, Marcus opened her locker without asking permission. What are you doing? Grace asked. Marcus reached inside and pulled out a receipt. What's this? A receipt for $400 shoes? That's quite expensive on a waitress's salary. Several other staff members walking by turned to look. That's not mine, Grace said firmly. I've never seen it before. Marcus smiled coldly. Really? It has your name on it, paid in cash 3 days ago. He raised his voice slightly, ensuring others could hear. Seems like someone's been spending beyond their means. Grace recognized what was happening immediately. Marcus was creating more evidence against her. You put that in my locker, she said, keeping her voice low. Just like you're setting me up for the missing money. Marcus laughed. That's a serious accusation, Grace. I suggest you save your explanations for Mr. Peterson. He'll be here at 3 o'clock. After Marcus left, Sarah approached Grace cautiously. I heard what happened, she said. I don't believe you bought those shoes. Thank you, Grace said, fighting back tears. Sarah looked around to make sure no one was listening. Listen, I know more about Marcus. He's been dating a woman named Vanessa from the jewelry store on 5th Avenue. My cousin works there and says he bought a $3,000 necklace last month. The staff wonder how he can afford these things. I need proof, Sarah, Grace said desperately. Words won't help me. Sarah bit her lip. I want to help, but I need this job. I'm afraid of Marcus. I understand, Grace said. You've already helped just by telling me this. At exactly 2 o'clock, Maya arrived at the restaurant after school. She went straight to the break room where Sarah was waiting for her. Your mom's getting ready for the meeting, Sarah explained. She asked me to watch you." Maya nodded solemnly. "I need to use the bathroom." "It's right across the hall," Sarah said. Once out of Sarah's sight, Maya pulled out her phone and sent a text message to the number Richard had given her. "I'm here." Mom's meeting starts in 1 hour. Within 15 minutes, Richard Whitman entered Starlight Restaurant with Michael Porter beside him. The hostess recognized Richard immediately. "Your usual table, Mr. Whitman?" she asked, speaking extra slowly. Richard nodded politely, though his eyes showed his annoyance at being spoken to like a child. Once seated, Michael discreetly texted Maya, "We're in position. Richard will create a distraction at 3:15. Be ready." At 3 o'clock, Grace entered the private dining room where Harold Peterson waited. He was a tall man in his 60s with gray hair and a serious expression. "Grace, please sit down," he said formally. Marcus entered behind her carrying a folder. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Peterson." "Marcus tells me there's a serious situation with missing funds," Harold began. $8,000 is a significant amount." "Mr. Peterson, I didn't take that money," Grace said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I would never steal from this restaurant." Marcus opened his folder. "Grace, the evidence suggests otherwise. Only you and I know the safe code. I've been with this restaurant for 7 years with a perfect record." He pulled out papers from the folder. "There's also the matter of expensive purchases recently, $400 shoes, paid in cash." "That receipt was planted in my locker," Grace protested. "I've never even been to that store." Harold frowned. "Grace, these are serious accusations." Marcus pulled out another paper. "There's also the matter of Grace's criminal record. She was convicted of shoplifting at age 19. Harold looked at Grace with disappointment. "Is this true?" "Yes," Grace admitted. "It was one mistake a long time ago. I was young and desperate. But I've changed, Mr. Peterson. I've worked here for 3 years without any problems." The meeting continued with Marcus presenting more evidence, while Grace desperately defended herself. Harold's expression grew increasingly troubled. At exactly 3:15, a commotion erupted in the main dining room. There was the sound of breaking glass and raised voices. Sarah burst into the private dining room. "Mr. Peterson, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but there's an urgent situation. A customer is very upset about his meal and is demanding to speak with the owner." Harold stood up immediately. "Marcus, come with me. Grace, wait here. We'll continue this discussion shortly." Once they left, Sarah quickly closed the door and whispered to Grace, "Maya said to tell you it's working. They're checking the office now." In the main dining room, Richard Whitman stood beside a table with a broken water glass on the floor. He was signing rapidly, appearing very agitated. Servers were trying unsuccessfully to calm him down. "He's demanding to speak to the owner," Michael explained to Marcus and Harold when they approached. "There was a problem with his meal." While everyone's attention was on Richard, Maya slipped down the hallway where Michael had left her a key card he'd secretly copied from Marcus's desk earlier. She used it to open the office door and hurried inside with Michael, who had quietly excused himself from the commotion. "We need to find proof quickly," Michael whispered. "Check the bookshelf." Maya scanned the shelves while Michael searched the desk. She noticed a large book titled Financial Management for Restaurants that looked newer than the others. "Michael, look at this one," she said, pulling it down. When she opened it, she gasped. The inside pages had been cut out, creating a hollow space filled with bundles of cash. "We found it!" she whispered excitedly. Just then, the office door opened. Marcus stood in the doorway, his face contorting with rage as he saw them with the evidence of his crime. "What are you doing in my office?" he demanded, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. Maya stood frozen, clutching the book with the hidden cash inside. Michael stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of her. "I'm so sorry for the confusion," Michael said smoothly. "I'm Michael Porter, a potential investor interested in restaurant franchises. The hostess said I could use the restroom down this hall, but I must have taken a wrong turn." Marcus's eyes narrowed as he looked from Michael to Maya, then to the hollowed-out book in her hands. "And why is this child in my office? Going through my personal belongings?" "This is my niece," Michael said quickly. "She's with me for the day. Maya, put that book back where you found it, please." Maya carefully returned the book to the shelf, her hands trembling. "This is clearly not the restroom," Marcus said coldly. "And that's a very poor excuse for trespassing in a private office." Before Michael could respond, Harold Peterson's voice called from the hallway. "Marcus, where did you go? Where did you—" "We need to finish the meeting." Marcus's face tightened. He pointed to the door. "Get out. Now. We'll discuss this invasion of privacy later." Michael nodded, taking Maya's hand. "Again, my apologies for the confusion. Come along, Maya." As they left the office, Marcus locked the door behind them and followed them back toward the dining room, watching suspiciously as they returned to Richard's table. "Did you find anything?" Richard signed to Maya when she sat down. Maya nodded slightly, signing back, "Yes, money hidden in a book. But Marcus caught us." Richard's expression remained calm, but his eyes showed concern. He signed, "Wait for my signal." In the private dining room, Harold Peterson looked frustrated. "Now, where were we?" "Grace, Marcus has presented some troubling evidence. Do you have anything to say in your defense?" Grace took a deep breath. "Mr. Peterson, I've worked at Starlight for 3 years. I've never been late, never called in sick, and never had a single complaint. Why would I suddenly steal $8,000? "Perhaps because you needed it," Marcus suggested. "Single mother, always struggling with rent and bills. The temptation might have been too much." "That's not fair," Grace protested. "Yes, I work hard to provide for my daughter, but I would never steal." Harold sighed. "Grace, I want to believe you, but the evidence—" The door opened, and Richard Whitman entered with Michael beside him. "Mr. Whitman?" Harold stood up, surprised. "I apologize for the commotion earlier. I hope everything is satisfactory now." Michael spoke as Richard signed. "Mr. Whitman would like to join this meeting. He has information relevant to the situation with Grace Johnson." Harold hesitated, then nodded. "Of course. Please, sit down." Marcus's face hardened. "This is a private personnel matter, Mr. Peterson. I don't think outside guests should be involved." "Mr. Whitman is a valued customer," Harold replied. "Let's hear what he has to say." Richard took out his phone and opened a text-to-speech app. He typed quickly, and a computerized voice spoke, "I am Richard Whitman, CEO of Whitman Innovations. I have been coming to Starlight Restaurant every Thursday for 6 months." "Yes, we're honored to have you as a regular customer," Harold said respectfully. Richard typed again, "I am deaf, as you know. To navigate a world designed for hearing people, I use specialized technology that helps me document my experiences. My hearing aids contain recording capability that automatically creates an audio diary of my interactions." Marcus shifted in his seat. "What does this have to do with the missing money?" Richard continued typing. 3 weeks ago, I was sitting at my usual corner table. Because I cannot hear, I've learned to be extremely observant. I noticed Marcus Brown having a private phone conversation while checking the restaurant's safe. The room grew quiet as Richard connected his phone to a small speaker he removed from his pocket. He pressed play, and a clear recording filled the room. "Yeah, it's working perfectly," Marcus's voice said. "Peterson doesn't check the books closely enough to notice small amounts missing. I've been skimming for months now." There was a pause. Then Marcus's voice continued. "I know, the Rolex was expensive, but Vanessa deserved something nice. Don't worry, I've got a plan for covering the larger amounts. There's a waitress here with a criminal record. Single mom, desperate for money. She's perfect to take the fall if questions come up." Another pause. $8,000 is a lot, I know. But I need it for the down payment. Trust me, the single mom with the record is the perfect scapegoat. Who would believe her over me?" Harold's face paled as the recording played. Grace gasped, her hand covering her mouth. Marcus jumped to his feet. "This is fake! He doctored this recording to help her!" Marcus shouted, lunging toward Richard and grabbing for the phone. "He's making this up!" Michael quickly stepped between them, blocking Marcus's reach. "The recording is authentic, Mr. Peterson. Richard has dozens of hours of recordings from his visits. This isn't the only incriminating conversation we've documented." "You can't do this," Marcus snarled at Richard. "Recording private conversations is illegal." Richard typed calmly. "Not in New York State. As long as one party to the conversation consents to the recording, it is perfectly legal. I was present in the restaurant when you made these statements in a public area." Harold stood up slowly. "Marcus, is this true? Have you been stealing from my restaurant?" "Of course not," Marcus protested. "This is ridiculous. They're all working together to frame me. Grace probably put them up to this because she knew we discovered her theft." The door opened again and Sarah peeked in. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's an important call for Mr. Peterson at the front desk." Harold waved her away. "Take a message. We're in the middle of something critical." "Actually," Sarah said, slipping into the room, "I need to say something. I've been afraid to speak up, but I can't stay quiet anymore." She turned to Harold. "Marcus has been threatening staff for months. He fired 2 people who questioned missing inventory, and he's been spending way beyond what he could afford on his salary." Marcus's face reddened. "This is absurdity. You're just trying to protect Grace because you're friends." While the argument continued, Sarah discreetly passed a key to Maya, who had quietly appeared in the doorway. Maya nodded and disappeared down the hall. Maya used the key to unlock Marcus's office, where Michael joined her seconds later. They quickly retrieved the hollowed-out book with the cash inside. "Got it," Maya whispered. Back in the meeting room, tensions were escalating. "I've had enough of these baseless accusations," Marcus said, heading for the door. "I need to make a phone call. We'll continue this discussion after I contact my lawyer." Just as he reached for the doorknob, it opened. Maya and Michael stood there, holding the hollowed-out book. Maya opened it, revealing stacks of cash neatly arranged inside. "We found this in Marcus's office," Michael said. "It was hidden inside this book on the shelf." Harold stepped forward and examined the cash. "These are marked bills," he said in shock. "I mark certain bills in our safe deposits as a security measure. These are definitely from our restaurant." Marcus backed away, his confident demeanor crumbling. "This is a setup! They planted that cash. I've never seen that book before." "It has your name written inside the cover," Maya pointed out quietly. Harold looked at the first page where "Property of Marcus Brown" was indeed written in neat handwriting. Richard typed on his phone again. "The recording mentioned $8,000 specifically. Count the money, Mr. Peterson." Harold did, his hands slightly shaking. 8,000 exactly. Marcus looked from face to face, then suddenly shoved past Michael and ran toward the dining room. Thomas Wilson, the restaurant's chef who had been listening from the hallway, stepped into Marcus's path and grabbed his arm. "Not so fast," Thomas said firmly. "I've watched you bully my staff for too long." 2 customers stood up from a nearby table, a man and woman in casual clothes who had been quietly dining during the commotion. "James Rodriguez, New York Police Department," the man said, showing his badge. "This is my partner, Lisa Chen. We were enjoying our day off, but it seems we're needed professionally. Officer Rodriguez is a regular customer," Harold explained to a shocked Grace. "Pure coincidence he's here today." "A fortunate coincidence," Officer Rodriguez said, approaching Marcus. "Sir, I believe we need to have a conversation at the station about these allegations." Marcus glared at Richard, then at Grace. "This isn't over," he muttered. "Actually, I think it is," Officer Chen said, guiding Marcus toward the door. Harold turned to Grace, his expression deeply apologetic. "Grace, I don't know what to say. I'm so sorry for doubting you." Grace couldn't speak, overwhelmed by the rapid turn of events. Maya rushed to her side, hugging her tightly. "It's okay now, Mom," she said. "Mr. Richard helped us. You're not in trouble anymore." Richard watched the scene unfold, a small smile on his face as he signed to Maya, "Tell your mother this isn't the end. It's just the beginning." The Starlight restaurant buzzed with shocked whispers as officers Rodriguez and Chen escorted Marcus toward the front door. Customers stared openly, some even taking pictures with their phones. "Should we clear the restaurant?" Harold asked Officer Rodriguez quietly. "Not necessary," the officer replied. "We'll take Mr. Brown to the station for questioning. Your staff can continue normal operations while we sort this out." Marcus turned back, his face flushed with anger. "This is a mistake. That recording is fake. Whitman is helping Grace frame me." "Save it for the station," Officer Chen said firmly. As they led Marcus away, Harold turned to the remaining group in the private dining room. His face showed a mixture of shock and embarrassment. "Grace, I don't know what to say," he began. "I've known Marcus for 7 years. I trusted him completely." "It's not your fault, Mr. Peterson," Grace said, still trying to process everything that had happened. Richard typed on his text-to-speech app. "People like Marcus count on the trust of good people like you. That's how they succeed." Harold nodded sadly. "I need to contact my lawyer and accountant. We'll need to do a complete audit." He looked at Grace. "Obviously, you're cleared of all accusations. Please take the rest of the day off with pay." Maya hugged her mother tightly. "See, Mom? Everything's okay now." But the situation was far from resolved. Within 30 minutes, Harold's phone rang. It was the police station. "Mr. Peterson? This is Detective Williams. Mr. Brown is claiming the evidence against him was planted. He insists the recording was doctored and that Mr. Whitman and Ms. Johnson conspired to frame him." Harold sighed deeply. "What do you need from us?" "We'll need formal statements from everyone involved, and we need to verify the authenticity of Mr. Whitman's recordings." Richard, who had remained at the restaurant, was already prepared for this. He contacted his lawyer, Jennifer Mitchell, who arrived within the hour. She was a confident woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a briefcase full of documents. "The recordings are completely legal," Jennifer explained to Harold. "New York is a one-party consent state for recordings. Since Richard was present in the restaurant, a public place, when these conversations occurred, the evidence is admissible." Harold looked relieved. "That's good to hear. Marcus is trying to claim it was all fabricated." Jennifer nodded. "We expected that. Richard has been documenting his experiences at Starlight for months. We have multiple recordings of Marcus's suspicious behavior, not just the one you heard." While the adults discussed legal matters, Maya sat with Sarah in the break room. "I was so scared when Marcus caught us in his office," Maya admitted. Sarah nodded. "He's always been intimidating. That's why many of us never spoke up before." The door opened, and Marcus's assistant manager, David, entered. "Sarah, can I talk to you for a minute?" Sarah hesitated. "About what?" "Just some scheduling questions," David said. In private, Sarah reluctantly followed David to the hallway. Once they were alone, his friendly demeanor changed. "Marcus called from the station," David whispered harshly. "He says if you testify against him, he'll tell everyone about the time you came to work an hour late last month." Sarah's eyes widened. "That's it? That's his threat?" "I was late once because my car broke down, and I already cleared it with Harold. He also mentioned something about your immigration paperwork having irregularities," David continued. "He says he can make trouble for your cousin too." Sarah's face paled slightly, but then she straightened her shoulders. "Tell Marcus his intimidation tactics won't work anymore." Unknown to David and Sarah, Chef Thomas had overheard their conversation from around the corner. He stepped forward, his tall frame imposing in his white chef's coat. "Is there a problem here?" Thomas asked, looking directly at David. David stepped back. "No problem, just discussing scheduling." Sounded more like delivering threats, Thomas said. Sarah, is David bothering you? He's passing along threats from Marcus, Sarah admitted, trying to stop me from testifying. Thomas turned to David. I suggest you return to your duties, David, and tell Marcus his days of bullying staff are over. David hurried away without another word. Thomas placed a reassuring hand on Sarah's shoulder. Thank you, she said quietly. I should have stepped in sooner, Thomas replied. We all should have. In the main dining room, Richard and Michael sat with Harold and Grace discussing next steps. Richard typed on his phone. My team has tracked down former employees who left after confrontations with Marcus. Really? Harold asked. Who? Jason Wright, the bartender who quit 6 months ago, Michael explained, and Emily Foster, the hostess who left last year. Both claim Marcus accused them of mistakes they didn't make after they questioned missing inventory or cash discrepancies. Harold shook his head sadly. I had no idea. Marcus always said they left for better opportunities. They're willing to come forward now, Michael added. They're on their way to the police station to give statements. Grace, who had been quiet, finally spoke up. I still can't believe this is happening. Yesterday I was afraid I'd go to jail for something I didn't do. Now, Richard typed, now the truth is coming out. The restaurant's phone rang. Harold answered it, his expression growing increasingly troubled as he listened. That was my accountant, he said after hanging up. He's doing a preliminary check of our financial records. He says there are irregularities going back at least a year. Marcus may have stolen over $100,000 in total. The group sat in stunned silence. How did I miss this? Harold asked, his voice pained. How did I not see what was happening in my own restaurant? Marcus was careful, Grace said gently. He only took small amounts most of the time, and he had everyone intimidated into silence. Outside the restaurant, a police car pulled up. Detective Williams entered with another officer. We need to collect formal statements from everyone, Detective Williams explained, and we'd like permission to search Mr. Brown's office more thoroughly. Of course, Harold agreed. While the detective spoke with Harold, Officer Martin approached Grace. Ms. Johnson, we'll need your statement as well. Grace nodded, but her hands were trembling. For years, she had avoided any interaction with police because of her past record. Now she was about to be questioned again, even if as a witness rather than a suspect. Richard noticed her anxiety and typed, Would you like me to come with you? My lawyer can be present for your statement as well. You would do that for me? Grace asked, surprised. Richard nodded and signed to Maya, who translated, He says he believes in you and no one should face difficult moments alone. As they prepared to give their statements, Marcus's phone on his desk began ringing. Harold hesitated, then answered it with the detective's permission. Starlight Restaurant, this is Harold. The voice on the other end sounded confused. This is Vanessa from Diamond Elegance Jewelry. I'm calling for Marcus. Is he available? I'm afraid not, Harold said. May I ask what this is regarding? He placed a deposit on a watch last week, $5,000. I'm calling to let him know it's arrived. Harold's grip tightened on the phone. Thank you. I'll let him know. After hanging up, he turned to Detective Williams. You might want to check with Diamond Elegance Jewelry on 5th Avenue. Apparently, Marcus put a $5,000 deposit on a watch last week. The detective made a note. We'll look into it. As the afternoon progressed, more evidence of Marcus's theft and deception emerged. His phone contained text messages about expensive purchases and plans to borrow more money from the restaurant. His computer revealed carefully hidden spreadsheets tracking his actual theft alongside altered numbers he presented to Harold. Grace, who had given her statement and returned to the dining room, finally found the courage to speak directly to Harold. I've worked here for 3 years, she said. I've seen how Marcus operates. He's always been a bully, but I never imagined he was stealing. Why didn't anyone tell me? Harold asked. Fear, Grace said simply. He made sure everyone knew he had your complete trust. and he found weaknesses to exploit: my criminal record, Sarah's immigration concerns, Thomas's need for flexible hours for his sick mother. Harold looked around at his staff, seeing them in a new light. "I've failed all of you. I promise that's going to change." Richard, who had been watching the conversations unfold, typed a new message. "Sometimes from bad situations, new opportunities emerge. This restaurant can become something better now." As the investigation continued into the evening, Detective Williams approached the group again. "We've found enough evidence to formally charge Marcus Brown with grand larceny and fraud," he announced. "But we've also discovered something concerning. There are indications this might not be his first time doing this. We found references to 2 other restaurants in his files." Harold looked stunned. "You mean he's done this before?" "It appears so," the detective confirmed. "This case may be bigger than we initially thought." Detective Williams turned to Harold. "I need to make some calls. This investigation is expanding beyond what we initially thought." Harold nodded, still processing the revelation that Marcus's crimes might extend beyond Starlight Restaurant. The detective stepped away, phone in hand, leaving the group in stunned silence. In a quiet corner of the restaurant, Marcus sat handcuffed to a chair under Officer Rodriguez's supervision. His earlier confidence had vanished, replaced by nervous fidgeting. His eyes darted constantly around the room, calculating. "Can I use the restroom?" Marcus asked suddenly. Officer Rodriguez hesitated. "We'll be heading to the station shortly." "It's urgent," Marcus insisted. "It could be 20 minutes before we reach the station." The officer sighed. "Fine. Officer Chen will escort you." Across the room, Richard was watching this exchange carefully. Though he couldn't hear the conversation, he noticed Marcus's body language, the tense shoulders, the quick glances toward the kitchen's back exit. Something felt wrong. Richard quickly typed a message to Maya. "Watch Marcus. I don't trust him." Maya, who was helping Sarah reset tables, received the text and looked up. She saw Officer Chen unlocking Marcus's handcuffs from the chair, leaving only one wrist cuffed. Richard observed too, noticing something troubling. Marcus's hand sliding something from the table beside him. It appeared to be a steak knife that had been left during the commotion. Richard's eyes widened, but he had no way to shout a warning. He frantically typed another message to Maya. "Danger! Marcus took knife. Tell officers now." Before Maya could relay the message, Marcus was already being escorted toward the restrooms near the kitchen. Richard stood up abruptly, catching Michael's attention. He signed rapidly. "Marcus has weapon. Back exit. Stop him." Michael understood immediately. "Maya, stay here," he instructed before hurrying toward Thomas, who was directing the kitchen staff. "Thomas," Michael said urgently, "Marcus has a knife. He's heading toward the restrooms near the back exit." Thomas's eyes widened. "I'll check it out," he said, wiping his hands on his apron. Meanwhile, Officer Chen waited outside the men's restroom door. "2 minutes, Brown," she called in. Inside, Marcus moved quickly. Instead of using the facilities, he went directly to the small window. Too small for most adults, but Marcus was slim. He had already worked the screen loose earlier that day, a precaution he'd taken when he first suspected he might be caught. Just as he was pushing the window open, the door opened. Thomas stood there, his large frame filling the doorway. "What are you doing?" Thomas asked, instantly assessing the situation. Marcus spun around, the steak knife now visible in his hand. "Back off!" he hissed. "I'm leaving!" Thomas took a step forward. "Don't be stupid, Marcus. There are police officers right outside." "I said back off!" Marcus lunged forward with the knife. Thomas stepped back, but not quickly enough. The knife sliced his forearm, drawing blood. "Officer Chen!" Thomas called out, clutching his arm. Marcus seized the moment of distraction to grab Thomas, pulling him into a chokehold with the knife pressed against his neck. "Stay quiet or I'll cut deeper," Marcus threatened as he backed out of the restroom, using Thomas as a shield. Officer Chen had drawn her weapon as soon as she heard the commotion. "Drop the knife, Brown," she commanded when they emerged. "Stay back or he gets hurt," Marcus warned, continuing to back toward the kitchen. The kitchen staff scattered as Marcus entered, still holding Thomas hostage. Detective Williams and Officer Rodriguez arrived from the dining room, weapons drawn. "Marcus, don't make this worse for yourself," Detective Williams said calmly. "You're looking at serious charges already. Don't add assault and kidnapping." "I'm walking out of here," Marcus said, his voice shaking slightly. "Once I'm clear, I'll let him go." Grace, Maya, and Harold watched in horror from the dining room entrance. Richard, however, was nowhere to be seen. "Where's Mr. Whitman?" Maya whispered to Michael, who had returned to her side. "Creating a diversion," Michael whispered back. "Richard knows what to do." Inside the kitchen, the standoff continued. Marcus had backed up against the prep tables, moving steadily toward the rear exit. Thomas remained calm despite the knife at his throat. "Marcus, think about this," Thomas said quietly. "Where will you go? How far do you think you'll get?" "Shut up," Marcus snapped, pressing the knife closer. "I have money and contacts. I just need to get out of here." Detective Williams took a careful step forward. "Let's talk about this, Marcus. We can work something out." "Stay back," Marcus shouted, his hand trembling slightly. What no one had noticed was Richard's silent entry into the kitchen through the staff door. Being deaf, he moved without making the small noises hearing people typically make. He had navigated silently behind the center island, positioning himself near a stack of metal pots on a shelf behind Marcus. Richard made eye contact with Officer Chen, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. Understanding the plan, she continued talking to keep Marcus's attention forward. "Marcus, think about what you're doing," Officer Chen said. "Is it worth risking someone's life?" "It's worth not spending 20 years in prison," Marcus replied, continuing his slow retreat. Richard waited for the perfect moment. When Marcus was directly in front of the shelf, Richard pushed the stack of pots with all his strength. They crashed to the floor with a deafening clatter. Though Richard couldn't hear the noise, he saw its effect immediately. Marcus instinctively turned toward the sound, loosening his grip on Thomas just enough. Thomas seized the opportunity, throwing his elbow back hard into Marcus's ribs and twisting away from the knife. In that split second of confusion, Officer Rodriguez tackled Marcus from the side, knocking the knife from his hand. Both men crashed to the floor, where Rodriguez quickly subdued Marcus, pressing his knee into the restaurant manager's back as he secured the handcuffs on both wrists. "You're under arrest for assault, attempted kidnapping, and resisting arrest," Officer Rodriguez said, breathing heavily. "That's in addition to the fraud and theft charges." Thomas stood nearby, holding his bleeding arm. "Someone get me a clean towel," he said calmly. Sarah rushed forward with a kitchen towel, helping Thomas apply pressure to the wound. "You need to go to the hospital," she said. "It's not deep," Thomas assured her. "But yes, I'll get it looked at." Detective Williams approached Richard, who had moved to the side once the situation was under control. The detective nodded respectfully and held up his phone with a message typed, "Thank you for your quick thinking." That could have ended much worse. Richard smiled slightly and typed back, "I've learned to observe carefully when you can't hear danger coming." Marcus, now fully restrained, glared at Richard as Officer Rodriguez lifted him to his feet. "This isn't over," he muttered. "Actually, it is," Detective Williams said firmly. "With attempted kidnapping and assault with a weapon added to your charges, you're looking at a very long time behind bars." As the officers led Marcus away, properly escorted this time with 2 officers, Harold approached Thomas. "Are you all right?" Harold asked, his face pale with concern. "I'll need a few stitches," Thomas replied, "but I've cut myself worse chopping vegetables." Harold turned to Richard, extending his hand. "I don't know how to thank you." "Your quick thinking may have saved Thomas's life." Richard shook Harold's hand and typed on his phone. "No thanks needed. I'm glad everyone is safe now." Maya ran to Richard and hugged him tightly. "That was amazing," she signed excitedly. "You were like a superhero." Richard smiled and signed back, "Not a superhero, just observant." Grace approached next, her eyes filled with tears. "First you saved me from going to jail for something I didn't do, and now you saved Thomas. How can we ever repay you?" Richard typed, "Your friendship is enough," and seeing Marcus face justice for his crimes. As the kitchen staff began cleaning up the mess from the fallen pots, Harold gathered everyone's attention. "I want to say something to all of you," he began, his voice emotional. "I failed you as an owner. I didn't see what was happening in my own restaurant. I didn't protect you from Marcus's intimidation. That changes today. From now on, this restaurant will operate differently. Everyone will be heard and respected." The staff responded with applause, many with tears in their eyes. For some, it was the first time they felt truly valued at Starlight. Detective Williams returned after securing Marcus in the police car. "We'll need to continue our investigation over the next few days," he informed Harold. "Based on what we've found so far, Marcus appears to have stolen approximately $120,000 over the past year, and we're still exploring his connections to other restaurants where similar thefts occurred." Harold nodded grimly. "Whatever you need, Detective. My staff and I will cooperate fully." Richard, standing quietly to the side, watched the scene with satisfaction. He typed a message and showed it to Grace and Maya. Sometimes it takes a crisis to reveal the truth. Not just about what was wrong, but about what can be right. Maya signed back. "What happens now?" Richard smiled and signed, "Now we build something better." The next morning, Starlight Restaurant remained closed for the official police investigation. Yellow police tape marked the entrance, and officers moved between Marcus's office and the dining area, collecting evidence. Detective Williams stood beside a large table covered with financial documents, speaking with Harold. "We found these hidden in a locked compartment in Marcus's desk," he explained, pointing to a stack of receipts. "Purchases at high-end stores, jewelry receipts, travel bookings, all far beyond what someone on a restaurant manager's salary could afford." Harold shook his head in disbelief. "And I never noticed anything suspicious. He always seemed so dedicated to the restaurant." "Con men usually are very good at appearing trustworthy," Detective Williams said. "That's how they succeed." The front door opened and Officers Rodriguez and Chen entered with two forensic accountants carrying laptops and document boxes. "These are the financial specialists from the White Collar Crimes Division," Officer Rodriguez explained. "They'll go through your books thoroughly." One of the accountants, a woman with short gray hair and glasses, approached Harold. "I'm Linda Matthews. We'll need access to all your financial records for at least the past 2 years." "Of course," Harold agreed. "Whatever you need." While the investigation continued in the main restaurant area, Grace arrived with Maya. They had been asked to come in to provide additional information. Maya immediately spotted Richard and Michael sitting in a quiet corner, reviewing something on a tablet. "Mr. Richard," Maya called, rushing over to him. Richard looked up with a warm smile, his hands moving in greeting. "He says good morning," Michael translated, "and he's glad to see you both looking better after some rest." Grace nodded, though dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't slept much. "Thank you for meeting us here." The detective said they need more details about the restaurant's operations. Richard typed on his phone. "My lawyer is bringing the original recordings to authenticate them officially. She should be here soon." In Marcus's office, officers continued their search, opening drawers and examining files. Officer Chen discovered a hidden panel behind the bookshelf. "Detective Williams," she called. "You should see this." The detective entered the office as Officer Chen removed a stack of documents from the hidden space. "Looks like bank statements," she said. "Multiple accounts in different names, but the signature appears to be the same on all of them." Detective Williams examined the papers. These accounts hold deposits totaling over $120,000. And look at these addresses: Miami, Las Vegas, Chicago. These match the locations of other restaurants where similar thefts occurred. So he's been doing this for years, Officer Chen concluded, and getting away with it every time. Detective Williams added grimly. Jennifer Mitchell, Richard's lawyer, arrived with a secure case containing the original recordings and documentation. These are Richard's complete recordings from the past 6 months, she explained to Detective Williams. We've isolated the relevant sections where Marcus discusses his theft, but the full recordings are available to confirm they haven't been altered. The detective nodded. Our tech unit will verify their authenticity, but this is extremely helpful. As the investigation progressed, staff members began arriving one by one, having been called in to provide statements. Thomas came with his arm bandaged, Sarah arrived looking nervous but determined, and several others gathered in the waiting area. Harold approached the group. Thank you all for coming in today. I know this is difficult, but your information will help ensure Marcus is properly charged for what he's done. Sarah stepped forward hesitantly. Mr. Peterson, there's something we all want to tell you about Grace. Harold looked surprised. What about Grace? When the lunch shift was understaffed, she would stay extra hours without even adding it to her time card, Sarah explained. She covered for sick employees, trained new staff, and even helped in the kitchen when Thomas was short-handed. Thomas nodded. She would share her tips with the kitchen staff during slow seasons, knowing we don't get the same gratuities as servers. And she never complained, added David, who had been Marcus's assistant, even when Marcus deliberately gave her the most difficult customers or the largest sections. Harold turned to Grace, who looked embarrassed by the praise. I had no idea, he said softly. Richard, who had been watching the conversation, typed a message. I've observed Grace for months. She provides exceptional service even when she thinks no one is watching. That's true character. Harold nodded thoughtfully, then asked everyone to gather in the main dining room. Once all the staff were assembled, he stood at the center of the room. I've owned Starlight Restaurant for 12 years, he began. I thought I knew everything that happened here. I was wrong. Marcus Brown not only stole from me financially, but he also stole something more valuable, the trust and security that should exist in any workplace. He turned to Grace. Grace, I owe you the deepest apology. I doubted you based on Marcus's accusations without looking deeper. I've just learned how much you've contributed to this restaurant, often without recognition or proper compensation. Grace shook her head. Mr. Peterson, you don't have to— Yes, I do, Harold interrupted gently. What happened to you was unfair and hurtful, and I was part of that unfairness by not being more aware of what was happening in my own restaurant. He turned to address the entire staff. To all of you, I failed as an owner by allowing Marcus to create an environment of fear. That ends today. The staff exchanged glances, many nodding in agreement. Starlight will be closed for the next week while the investigation concludes and we reorganize, Harold continued. All of you will receive full pay during this time. When we reopen, things will be different. He turned back to Grace. Grace, I'd like you to take Marcus's position as restaurant manager. A collective gasp went through the room, followed by spontaneous applause. Grace stood frozen in shock. Me? She finally managed to say, but I don't have management experience. You have something more important, integrity and the respect of your colleagues, Harold said. And I'll double your current salary with proper benefits and schedule flexibility for Maya's school needs. Tears filled Grace's eyes as the staff continued to applaud. Maya hugged her mother tightly. See, Mom? I told you everything would be okay, she whispered. Across the room, Richard watched with satisfaction. He typed a message to Michael. This is just the beginning of what this place could become. Detective Williams approached Harold as the impromptu celebration continued. Mr. Peterson, we've finished our preliminary search. The evidence against Marcus Brown is substantial and damning. Will he go to prison? Harold asked. Almost certainly, the detective confirmed. The fraud charges alone carry significant sentences, and with the assault and kidnapping attempt, he's facing many years behind bars. Richard joined them, typing on his phone. What about the other restaurants he targeted? We're contacting them now, Detective Williams explained. Based on the documents we've found, Marcus has operated this scheme at least 3 other times in different cities. He simply changed his name slightly each time. Mark Brown, Marcus Browning, M.J. Brown, and moved on when suspicions arose. Harold shook his head in disbelief. I checked his references when I hired him 7 years ago. Everything seemed perfect. Forged references, most likely, the detective said. He was very thorough in creating his false identities. Across the room, Grace was still processing Harold's offer, surrounded by supportive colleagues. Maya had joined Richard and was signing excitedly to him. Mom's going to be the manager, she signed. This is amazing. Richard smiled and signed back. She deserves it, and you helped make it happen by being brave. Maya beamed with pride. What will happen now? Richard's hands moved thoughtfully as he signed. Now the restaurant can become something special, a place where everyone is valued and heard. Jennifer Mitchell approached Richard with news. The police have officially accepted your recordings as evidence. They've been authenticated by their tech unit. Richard nodded with satisfaction, then typed a message and showed it to Harold. I have an additional proposition for you about Starlight's future, when you're ready to discuss it. Harold looked intrigued. I'm certainly open to ideas after everything you've done to help us. Grace finally made her way over to them, still looking stunned by the turn of events. Mr. Peterson, are you sure about this offer? There must be people more qualified than me to manage the restaurant. Harold shook his head. Qualifications can be learned. Character can't. You've shown exceptional character through everything that's happened. Richard typed a new message. Sometimes the most difficult challenges reveal our true capabilities. You've demonstrated leadership when it mattered most. Grace looked between Harold and Richard, her expression shifting from uncertainty to determination. Then I accept, she said firmly, and I promise I won't let you down. As the group continued talking, Maya watched with bright eyes, thinking about how much had changed in just 2 days. From fearing her mother might go to jail to seeing her offered a management position, all because she had decided to speak to a deaf man everyone else ignored. 1 week later, Grace arrived at Starlight Restaurant at 7 in the morning. She paused outside the entrance, taking a deep breath before using her new key to unlock the door. The restaurant was quiet and empty, so different from the chaotic scene of the previous week. She walked to her new office, Marcus's old space completely transformed. The dark, imposing desk had been replaced with a lighter one positioned to face the door rather than tower over visitors. The walls, once covered with Marcus's awards and certificates, now displayed photos of the staff and local artwork. Grace set her bag down and straightened her new blazer, still feeling strange to be wearing business clothes instead of a waitress uniform. She had spent the past week learning the restaurant's systems, meeting with Harold's accountant, and planning changes to create a more transparent and supportive workplace. At 8:30, the staff began to arrive. They gathered in the dining room, many looking curious about what the new era at Starlight would bring. "Good morning, everyone," Grace said, feeling a flutter of nervousness. "Thank you all for being here. Today marks a fresh start for Starlight Restaurant." She outlined the immediate changes. Clear financial protocols with cash handling witnessed by 2 people at all times, a new scheduling system that distributed sections fairly, and an open-door policy for any concerns or suggestions. Most importantly, Grace concluded, we're going to create an environment where everyone feels valued. No more intimidation. No more fear. Thomas, his arm still bandaged from Marcus's attack, was the first to applaud. The others joined in, and Grace felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. The morning flew by as they prepared to reopen for lunch service. Grace moved between the kitchen and dining room, checking details and encouraging staff who seemed nervous about the changes. At noon, Harold arrived to see how things were going. "Grace, the place looks wonderful. How's your first day as manager?" "Busy but good," she replied, smiling. "Everyone's been supportive." "Excellent," Harold said. "And our first customer of the day has just arrived." Grace turned to see Richard Whitman entering the restaurant. The hostess, Emma, greeted him with a smile and a simple sign. "Welcome." Richard's face brightened with surprise. He signed back, "Thank you," as Emma led him to a table. Grace approached Richard's table. "Welcome back to Starlight," she said, making sure to face him directly as she spoke. Richard typed on his phone. "The place feels different already. Brighter somehow." "We've made many changes," Grace agreed, including basic sign language training for all staff. Emma learned how to welcome guests and take basic orders. Richard looked genuinely touched. He typed, "That's more consideration than most restaurants show. Thank you." Throughout the lunch service, Grace noticed how differently staff interacted with Richard. Instead of awkward pointing and avoidance, they made eye contact, used simple signs they'd learned, or wrote notes when needed. After the lunch rush ended, Harold invited Richard to stay for a meeting about future plans for the restaurant. They gathered in Grace's office with Michael, Richard's assistant. "Richard has made an interesting proposition," Harold explained. "He believes Starlight could become a model for inclusive dining in New York." Richard typed, "Many restaurants treat deaf customers poorly because staff don't know how to communicate. Starlight could show the industry a better approach." "I love that idea," Grace said, "but I'm not sure where to start." Michael spoke up. "Whitman Innovations has been developing restaurant technologies for the deaf community. Richard would like to use Starlight as a testing ground." After the meeting, Richard invited Grace and Maya to join him for dinner after closing. "I'd like to share something with you both," he typed. That evening, after the restaurant closed, Thomas prepared a special meal for the three of them. As they dined at a quiet corner table, Richard began sharing his story through Maya's interpretation. "I wasn't born deaf," Richard signed. "I lost my hearing at age 12 due to a rare viral infection. Suddenly the world became silent and strange." Grace watched his hands move with elegance and precision as Maya translated. "My parents didn't know how to handle it," Richard continued. "They sent me to special schools, hired tutors, tried everything to fix me. But deafness isn't something to fix. It's just a different way of experiencing the world." He explained how he taught himself to read lips, how he became fascinated with technology that could bridge communication gaps. "By the time I was 30, I had designed my first assistive device for the deaf. Now my company, Whitman Innovations, is an industry leader." "That's amazing," Grace said, truly impressed. Richard smiled, a hint of sadness in his eyes. "Financial success doesn't guarantee happiness. I built an empire but lived in isolation. My wife left 15 years ago. She said living with a deaf person was too difficult. My son lives in Europe and only calls on holidays." Maya translated with a frown. "That's not fair. Being deaf doesn't make you less of a person." "Thank you, Maya," Richard signed, his expression warming. "That's exactly right. It took me years to understand that the problem was never my deafness, but how people responded to it." He turned to Grace. "I've been watching you work for months. You're organized, efficient, and treat everyone with respect regardless of their status. Those are rare qualities." Grace blushed slightly. "I just try to do my job well." "Which is why I'd like to offer you a position at Whitman Innovations," Richard signed as Maya translated. "We need a project manager for our restaurant technology division. Someone who understands both restaurant operations and the importance of inclusive communication." Grace stared in shock. "Me? But I don't have any technology experience." "You have real-world expertise that engineers lack," Richard responded, "and the position would pay twice your new manager's salary with flexible hours and comprehensive benefits." Grace was speechless. The opportunity seemed too good to be true. Richard continued signing. "Take time to consider. There's no rush to decide." He then turned to Maya. "I've also been thinking about you, young lady. Your sign language skills are impressive for someone who taught herself. You have a natural gift for languages and communication." Maya beamed with pride. "I've established an educational fund for you," Richard signed. $100,000 for your future college education." Maya's jaw dropped as she translated this to her mother. $100,000? Really? Grace shook her head in disbelief. "Richard, that's incredibly generous, but we can't accept—" Richard held up his hand. "Please, it's already done. Consider it an investment in someone who bridged two worlds when no one else bothered to try." Over the next few days, Grace struggled with Richard's job offer. She was grateful for the restaurant manager position Harold had given her, and leaving so soon felt disloyal. Yet the opportunity at Whitman Innovations could change her and Maya's lives dramatically. On Friday evening, Starlight hosted a special community dinner to celebrate its reopening. Harold invited local business owners, regular customers, and even members of the deaf community Richard had connected them with. During the event, Harold made an announcement. "Starlight is embarking on a new journey," he told the gathered guests. "In partnership with Whitman Innovations, we're creating the most inclusive dining experience in New York City." He revealed that all staff would receive comprehensive sign language training, and the restaurant would host monthly events where deaf and hearing customers could share meals and conversations. The corner table that used to be Richard's solitary spot will become our connection corner, where customers are encouraged to dine with new people and learn from each other, Harold explained. As the evening progressed, Grace observed Maya confidently signing with deaf guests, bridging conversations between hearing and non-hearing diners. Her daughter was blooming with newfound purpose. Later, Grace found Richard watching the successful event from a quiet spot. "I've made my decision about your job offer," she said, making sure he could see her lips clearly. Richard raised his eyebrows expectantly. "I'd like to propose something different," Grace continued. "I want to stay at Starlight part-time while also working at Whitman Innovations part-time. That way I can help implement your restaurant technologies here as a real-world testing ground." Richard's face broke into a broad smile. He typed quickly, "The perfect solution. You can bridge both worlds, just like Maya." Grace nodded. "Harold has already agreed. He believes in your vision for what Starlight can become." Richard looked around the restaurant, now filled with animated conversations between people who might never have connected otherwise. He typed, "From my lonely corner table to this, quite a transformation in just 2 weeks." "All because Maya had the courage to approach you," Grace said softly. "And because you raised a daughter who sees people, not limitations," Richard typed in response. As they watched Maya enthusiastically teaching a group of children basic sign language across the room, Grace felt a sense of possibility she hadn't experienced in years. The path ahead was uncharted but filled with promise. 6 months had passed since that evening at Starlight Restaurant. The changes Grace had imagined that night had become reality, transforming not just the restaurant but the lives of everyone connected to it. On a busy Thursday evening, Starlight buzzed with activity. The restaurant was hosting its monthly silent dinner event, where deaf and hearing customers shared tables, food, and conversation. Every table had conversation cards with basic signs and topics to discuss, and the staff moved confidently through the room, using sign language alongside spoken words. Grace watched from near the kitchen, dressed in a professional suit rather than her old waitress uniform. Now she split her time between managing Starlight and her new role at Whitman Innovations, where she led the restaurant technology project. "Tonight's a full house," Thomas said, coming to stand beside her. His arm had healed completely, and he'd been promoted to head chef. Every table booked 2 weeks in advance. "People are excited about the concept," Grace replied. "It's not just a meal anymore. It's an experience." Across the room, What had once been Richard's lonely corner table was now the popular connection corner. Tonight, 8 people who had arrived as strangers sat together, some signing, some speaking, all engaged in animated conversation. The door opened, and Richard entered with Michael. Unlike his previous visits when he had been ignored, now several staff members greeted him with proper signs and guests waved in recognition. Emma, the hostess, approached him with a confident smile. "Good evening, Mr. Whitman," she signed clearly. "Your friends are waiting for you." Richard nodded appreciatively at her improved signing skills and followed her to a large table where Harold Peterson sat with several other guests. "Richard," Harold stood to greet him. "Perfect timing. We were just discussing the new menu design with the Braille options. Starlight had become known throughout New York City as a pioneer in inclusive dining. Food critics wrote about the innovative approach, business schools used it as a case study, and other restaurants were beginning to follow their example. At Whitman Innovations, Grace had helped develop a new ordering system specifically designed for deaf customers and staff. The technology was being tested at Starlight before being offered to other restaurants across the country. Maya entered from the back office, now 11 years old and carrying herself with new confidence. She wore a badge identifying her as a youth ambassador for the Whitman Foundation for Inclusive Communication, the organization Richard had established to fund sign language programs in schools across America. "Mom!" she called, hurrying over to Grace. "Mr. Richard brought the prototype. Can I show everyone?" "During dessert," Grace promised. "That's what we planned." Maya nodded excitedly and went to greet Richard, their hands moving quickly in conversation. What had begun as Maya's self-taught hobby had developed into fluent ASL, and now she was helping teach other children at her school. The front door opened again, and Officer Rodriguez entered in casual clothes, looking around until he spotted Grace. "Sorry I'm late," he said, approaching her. "Work ran long." "I'm glad you could make it," Grace replied, leading him to a quiet spot where they could talk. "You said you had news about Marcus?" Officer Rodriguez nodded. "His case helped us uncover a larger fraud ring operating in high-end restaurants across the country. By tracing his connections and financial records, we identified 7 other people running similar schemes. We've already arrested 4 of them." "That's incredible," Grace said. "The detective wanted me to thank Richard again for his recordings. They provided the pattern evidence we needed to connect the cases." As Officer Rodriguez joined the other guests, Grace found herself reflecting on how completely her life had changed. Just 6 months ago, she had been a struggling single mother falsely accused of theft, fearful of losing everything. Now she had financial security, professional respect, and a community that valued both her and Maya. At 8 o'clock, the lights dimmed slightly, and Thomas emerged from the kitchen carrying a cake with 11 candles. The entire restaurant began singing Happy Birthday to Maya, many guests also signing the words. Maya's face lit up with surprise and joy. She hadn't expected the celebration to include everyone in the restaurant. "Make a wish," Grace encouraged as the cake was placed before her daughter. Maya closed her eyes for a moment, then blew out all 11 candles in one breath. Everyone applauded, both with hands clapping and with the waving hands of deaf applause. "Before we enjoy this delicious cake," Richard signed, standing up so everyone could see him, "I have a special gift for the birthday girl." Michael handed Richard a wrapped package, which he presented to Maya. She opened it carefully to find a sleek device unlike anything she'd seen before. "This is a prototype of the new Whitman communicator," Richard signed as Michael spoke the words aloud for hearing guests. "Maya helped design it. It translates speech to text and sign language to spoken words." Maya held up the device for everyone to see. "This will help deaf and hearing people talk to each other without an interpreter," she explained. "You can speak, and it shows the words as text and in sign language on the screen, or you can sign to it, and it speaks the words aloud." Maya has been coming to Whitman Innovations twice a week after school to help our engineers understand what would be most helpful for young people learning sign language, Richard signed proudly. The guests were clearly impressed, and several of the deaf customers asked to see the device up close. As the evening continued with cake and celebration, Harold raised his glass in a toast. 6 months ago, Starlight was just another Manhattan restaurant. Today, we're a community, a place where barriers are broken and new connections are made, and it all began because a young girl decided to talk to someone everyone else was ignoring. 2 weeks later, Maya stood confidently in her school gymnasium, demonstrating the Whitman communicator at the science fair. Students, teachers, and parents gathered around her table, fascinated by the device and Maya's explanation of how it worked. "The most important thing I learned while helping design this," Maya told the judges, "is that communication isn't just about the words we say. It's about truly seeing other people and finding ways to connect with them." The principal, Mrs. Hernandez, watched with admiration. "Maya has started a sign language club at our school," she told Grace and Richard, who stood nearby. 27 students have joined so far. She's changing our entire school culture." Grace felt a surge of pride as she watched her daughter. She's always been special, but now she's found her purpose. Richard nodded in agreement. His own life had transformed dramatically as well. His Thursday evenings were no longer solitary meals in silence but joyful gatherings with Grace, Maya, and an ever-expanding circle of friends. The Whitman Foundation was growing rapidly, funding programs in more than 50 schools already. As the science fair judges awarded Maya first prize, she looked across the crowded gym and caught her mother's eye. In that silent exchange was a world of understanding about how far they had come and the journey still ahead. Later, as they celebrated Maya's win at a small ice cream shop, a young boy approached their table shyly. "Are you the girl who speaks with her hands?" he asked Maya. "I saw your project. It was really cool." Maya smiled and began teaching him a few basic signs. "Sometimes the people who can't hear are the ones who listen best," she told him, "and sometimes the smallest people can make the biggest difference." Richard watched this interaction with quiet satisfaction. From his lonely corner table at Starlight to this moment, a journey that had brought healing not just to him but to everyone involved. Grace reached across the table and squeezed his hand gently. No words or signs were needed between them. They both understood that their story had become something larger than themselves, a reminder that true connection happens when we find ways to understand each other, regardless of the barriers between us. As they walked home under the New York City stars, Maya skipping ahead and practicing her science fair speech for tomorrow's school assembly, Grace and Richard exchanged a smile. The future stretched before them, full of possibilities neither could have imagined 6 months ago, all because of a child who saw beyond silence and a man who had finally been heard. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.